Welcome back to Building Up Your Business, the podcast, your one-stop resource shop for your growing consumer goods business. I am your host, Erica Dill, founder of Operationally Up. We're here to optimize the operations of your growing business for maximum profitability. Today, I'm really excited to have Paris Bland with us. She's a passionate serial entrepreneur who unfortunately launched a tourism business in January of 2020. Couldn't see that crystal ball coming, but determined to start a new venture. She feverishly saved her money because she knew that her ultimate goal was starting Digital Executive. With her previous experience working with a team in Argentina, she saw the need for skilled team members that were in the same time zone. And now she is the founder of Digital Executive, where they specialize in finding high quality talent in South America to help you remotely grow your team. So it's fantastic that she's here today because we're going to be talking about how to hire an international team member. Paris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Erica, thank you so much for having me.
It's going to be a good time, I know it. So, when we're talking about hiring remote or international team members, you can pretty much go anywhere in the world. That's the beauty of it. But are there some countries that are better than others for certain skills, or what are the countries you would recommend?
100%. And I think that that's something that's really nuanced. A lot of times when people think, okay, I'm going to outsource or I'm going to use a remote worker, they immediately go to the Philippines, or that's just what comes to mind. And I think that the Philippines is fantastic and they do a lot of things really well. But there's also so many other regions that have the availability of the workforce and I think are better in certain areas. And it really just depends on the education system as well as even just certain cultural pieces that come into play of what
That makes
jobs
sense.
people are more adept at filling. Um, so just to give an example, one thing that I think the Philippines does very well is customer service. Around the world, I feel like they're known for that customer service aspect, and it's really easy to find good customer service folks in the Philippines. Um, so that's an easy piece. Another thing that I've heard that the Philippines does really well is invoicing. So any sort of billing professional. I know it's a little bit of a weird, off the beaten path one, but I've in accounting, they seem to really excel. It seems like a lot of the collegiate programs are geared towards finance, accounting, etc. Um,
That would make sense then.
oh, 100%. And we source in South America, and with South America, we also have a little bit of kind of that call center or that customer facing role. But I think what South America does very well, and specifically countries with some of the better education systems, like Argentina, who has one of the best education systems in the world, is they do specialty roles really well. So, virtual medical assistants, anything in operations, any sort of customer facing higher level role, you're able to get somebody that would be equivalent to somebody you would get in the US, but for a fraction of the cost.
So, I know that, I've dabbled a little bit in hiring international team members. And I know that you can go onto websites and find, remote team members. But then there's also agencies like Digital Executive. What are those pros and cons of, going and finding your own resource as opposed to using an agency like yours?
Yeah, so I'll give just an example right off the cuff. I was talking to somebody today and he was looking for a content writer. And he kind of asked me the same question of, why would I not just use Fiverr or Upwork? And I just asked him, what's your experience been? You're talking to me, so that obviously means that you didn't go straight to Fiverr or Upwork, right? Like, what's going on? And so after some back and forth, he admitted that he had actually been on Fiverr, uh, and the person that he had hired was basically using ChatGPT and then just throwing it onto his LinkedIn page. And so he wasn't getting the results he wanted,
Nice.
right? I know, and you can pay anybody to do that, right? And if that's like the skill
I
set that
could
you're
do that.
looking
Pay
for,
me, I'll go do that.
all right, I don't know, like I'll write a script for that. But I think that when you're on Fiverr, you're on Upwork, sometimes even the reviews or, anything that's out there, you can't really trust and verify that it's going to be a good fit. Like I even had my own horror story experience. I paid an SEO backlinker on Fiverr and it was such a disaster.
Oh
Like I looked at the list that they put my site on, and it was just straight up scam sites. I don't know if you've ever seen the Raybans.com scam. That's basically like a fake
no.
Ray-Ban site. And you've seen, I'm sure you've seen it on Facebook pages where they'll have the fake Ray-Bans giveaway. They were putting my my website on fake Ray-Ban sites.
Yeah,
I was
that'll
like, oh
get
my
you a lot of
gosh.
credibility, I'm sure.
Oh, and then it tanks your rating, right? It's the worst possible thing you can do. Like, it actually would have, it's worse than not doing it.
Wow.
So I
Okay,
do
so
think
we're
that there's a time
talking.
and play. Oh,
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No,
oh,
continue.
no, no, no worries. I do think that there's a time and place for Fiverr and Upwork, right? There are certain tasks that end up being good for those services. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more long term and a working relationship, it does make a little bit more sense to go through an agency or to just hire somebody directly that you source. That way you can get a little bit more of that working relationship without being kind of subject to whatever a freelancer has available. And you're also able to get a little bit more of a built in quality check.
I mean, you're basically looking for a long term partner if you're going after something like this. So it makes more sense to put the effort into what you would be doing if you were finding any other long term partner.
100%. And I think that you have to treat it almost as if you were hiring somebody down the street. And if that's the route that you want to take, you want this person to that's coming into your business that you're entrusting your business to. If you want it to feel like someone you can trust, you have to put effort into the hiring process. Fiverr and Upwork are great for short-term projects that are just a quick hire that don't have that much of an effect on the rest of the business. But if you're talking about a consistent, everyday person who will matter in your business, you need to put the effort into hiring them.
Yeah. So, and that kind of actually is leading into like where my thought process is going next. So, if we're a company and we're looking at hiring a remote team member and we've picked the country based on the type of person that we're looking for, and we want to put that effort in, do you treat it like any other hiring process? Is there supposed to, like, do you recommend job descriptions and interviews and all of those normal steps?
100%. And I think that if you're not doing that due diligence, it ends up kind of coming back to bite you in the butt, right? I've seen so many times where people will just rush a hiring process or they'll say, we need somebody right now. And they're not taking the time to see if this is somebody that they can connect with, if this is somebody they can work with every day, and if they're going to actually like the business on their end too. Somebody can get into a role, do it for 2 weeks, and say, I hate this and quit. So, part of that hiring process of creating a crafted job description, creating thoughtful interview questions, doing aptitude testing, and then meeting and discussing the job on an in depth level, that's not just making sure that you like whoever the candidate is, that's making sure that the candidate likes you as well.
So, I mean, we can talk a lot about
Mm-hmm.
the broken interviewing processes that we've seen. I'm sure we've all seen some really broken ones. What do you recommend for somebody? I mean, and I'm sure there are more specifics involved when you're even looking at a remote team member. So, what do you recommend as far as that in depth interview process?
We start with a screening call. I think that that's the number one piece. And this is no matter where you're hiring. A lot of people don't know this, but the show rate for interviews is really low. People will a lot of times book and then they'll either have anxiety or they'll get another offer or whatever it is. Even if you're a US company with a competitive salary, your show rate will be pretty low. For a lot of
Really?
companies, it's around 50%. hmm And you'd think, right, if someone's taking and going through the process of scheduling, that it would be higher. Not the case. So it's important to do that screening call because that not only gets people invested, but it also is a really low time commitment for you. So you're not wasting all of your time doing a 30-minute interview that somebody doesn't show up to. After the screening process is done, I think going to a second round interview, giving them more information about the company, in talking about the role in depth, and then asking more technical questions is absolutely necessary. And then after that, I usually recommend doing an aptitude test or a personality test. The DISC assessment's great just to figure out who you're working with and the type of personality that'll fit into your team. Uh, Beyond that, I think it's important to do a final round interview where you have multiple people rotating through. And in that final round interview, I think it's really important to ask questions about who they are, about what their motivations are. And that's where you get that cultural fit. And that's where you see if this is going to be somebody that you can bring onto your team and effectively integrate versus somebody that you can just hire for one quick project.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Now, when you're hiring I mean, because you're dealing with different cultures, you're dealing with different values, are there any types of questions, I mean, that you should ask or shouldn't ask to really help narrow in if that is a good fit? You talked about, in the final interview, you're asking, those kind of more personal questions. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, I think that talking about a 5-year plan is important and also what their ideal company would look like. So getting those motivations. There's even questions you can ask about how they like to receive praise. Uh, I like to give scenario questions in that final round interview as well. Um, that's something that I've done in the past. And I think it works really well. Asking a scenario question of something that comes up very frequently, a small roadblock, it's not necessary that they get the right answer, but it is necessary that they're using some sort of problem solving skills. And that's something that I've seen continuously, no matter where you're hiring, that somebody
Yeah.
they'll hit a roadblock and that's it. They'll stop, they'll have to ask for help, they won't be able to move past it. So figuring out how somebody deals with roadblocks or how they would deal with a scenario, even if it's not the right answer or what you would want, seeing how they problem solve or where their mind goes is very useful.
Well, and I think that leads into, a lot of the questions that you see going on right now about hiring is, people are saying, don't necessarily focus on like the right answers, like you're saying, or the specific hard skills. Look for the people who have the critical thinking skills and who have those problem
Mm-hmm.
solving skills. Because if they can show that they can think through those processes, you can teach them the hard skill of where to get the right answer. You can't teach them how to think their way out of a box.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that that is true to an extent. One thing that I've run into is sometimes you'll see companies that they'll have somebody that starts as maybe a virtual assistant and then they promote them to an account executive and then they just slowly start taking on more responsibilities in the company and moving up higher and higher. But if you're going to do that, you have to provide at a certain level career training. And sometimes
Yeah.
people will hit a max of this is higher than any position they've ever held, and they don't really necessarily know what they're doing. They might know the SOPs of the company, but they're not bringing any sort of outside thought to the table. So I think it is important to promote within and push that narrative. It's also equally important at a certain point to recognize where somebody's limitations might be, and for their professional growth, they might have to leave, right? And that could be 5, 6 years down the line, but it it just depends on the situation. Or you invest and you got to get them career training and make sure they're integrated.
Absolutely. Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that because when I work with businesses, I see that in operations departments all the time. Like I'll come into a business. I mean, I've led operations at 4 or 5 different companies at a senior level. So I have that outside experience, but I'll go into some of these smaller companies and the, highest senior person for operations has only had operations experience in that company, and they're fantastic team members. They're dedicated, they know the company inside and out, but their only operations experience is within that organization, and that's where the company really is missing that outside experience, that subject matter expert to really bring it home for them. So I've seen that firsthand so many times.
And there's so many different ways to get career training, right? You can sign somebody up for a class, you can bring in a consultant. And I actually think that's a really good way to do it, if I'm being honest. Just bring in a consultant to cross check them and just sit with them and literally just work with them on implementing some of these processes and optimizing. If somebody's doing well, I don't think you necessarily need to fire them because this is the highest position
Right.
they've held, but it needs to go hand in hand. And when you're searching for team members too, I think that outsourcing piece ends up being a really good way to fill spots in your current hierarchy or in your current organization structure. Um, and you can hire somebody outsourced, but a lot of people don't realize that will bring that level of experience that normally you would have either a
Yeah.
consultant come in for. And they might just be doing one little aspect of the business, but they're making it their own and they're bringing that diversity in. So there's multiple ways that you can go that route without spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a consulting process.
Well, and if you're bringing in that new energy into the team, if you have, let's say, a team that's already working, marketing team or what, maybe one of these specialized areas where you've got team members who've grown up through the ranks, and then you bring in that professional from outside, from overseas or in South America, for example. They can bring that new energy, that new vibrancy, and that subject matter expert that we were just talking about to kind of reinvigorate that team.
Mhm. And I do think that that's also just bringing it. I'm such a huge fan of that too, is just bringing somebody in for a project and saying, hey, we're going to have somebody from outside lead this project. And then you not only get a deliverable, but then your team is learning from them and they're able to ask
Yeah.
questions and they're able to take the way that project was done and apply it to multiple others throughout the business.
So is that I mean, it sounds from the way you're talking that that's something that you guys source for on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I think that again, right, when we kind of specialize in VAs, and that's how we advertise as virtual assistant services. But what we found, and I didn't know this before I started working in outsourcing, was that some of the folks that we bring in are very high level. Um, they're people who have held at some of these large international companies, they've been the head of a department or department manager of some of these companies that you'd recognize, right? Like Accenture, Google in South America, because these large international companies that are worldwide are going to have offices no matter where you're looking. And those offices are going to be staffed with incredibly competent people, just at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah. Well, and who's not looking for remote work these days? So they would love the idea of not having to go into an office and remotely work for your company.
Oh, and so many people too are at the point in their career where, especially if they've been working for somewhere and they're in their 50s, 60s, they might be kind of nearing towards retirement. And we get so many people who are at that stage where they've had an amazing long career and they just want to do consulting work for a US based company at a much lower rate than you expect.
Wow. That's really great. I love that. Are there certain industries that you guys are you kind of industry agnostic?
Um, so we really do work with so many different industries, but I'll say I think the thing that we again, and this is going back to different regions, specialize in different areas. Really
Right.
anything creative and anything customer service facing tends to be our domain. So with
Okay.
marketing, anything related to social media, video editing, marketing, all those creative pieces, I have found that South America invests so much in the creative processes. And some of these, I think in the US, people just sometimes aren't encouraged to go into these creative fields. And because of that, there ends up being a shortage of professionals in the creativity world, right? Versus if you're in South America, they have degree programs for social media management that are really comprehensive, and all the graduates end up being incredibly high level. So that we do really well, and I'm really proud of the outcome too that we get with a lot of our social media marketing, editing, video editing hires, graphic design as well, and UX UI. I think all of those do very well. Uh, on the other end of the spectrum, with the or account management, client facing, that also tends to do very well. Again, you're having people that the Spanish to English, it translates very easily. And so just people with the same syntax, you're getting a lot of completely English fluent, not just English proficient or advanced English, just English fluent. Um, and it's so much easier to, I think, relate to somebody in the same time zone as you as well. Being on the same hours, talking, being able to schedule a call, and it's a 2 hour time zone difference. It's no big deal. That
Yeah,
has a lot of
definitely
leverage.
here to Europe, it's brutal.
100%. And you can be talking to somebody in the UK and you're scheduling an early morning call. It's the end of their day. They're not going to have energy for that call.
And I don't have energy for that 7 a.m. call. Like, nobody's happy about that call. Well, awesome. I really appreciate all of the knowledge that you've shared. And I'm sure our listeners have learned a whole bunch from you and your expertise. If somebody has any questions about, further questions about what you've said today or about your services, where can they reach you? What's the best way to find you?
I feel like I love LinkedIn. My name is very easy to find on LinkedIn too, so that's an easy tag. It's Paris Bland. Just send me a message. I'm constantly on it. It's always on my screen. We also have a website that's digital executive without the E on the front of executive. And you can check out some of our folks that we have on there.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and also in the comments below this video, we'll put your LinkedIn and we'll also put Paris's website. So if you need more information, you know where to get a hold of her. And hopefully this helps you get your next international or remote hire. Thank you so much, Paris. It's been a sheer pleasure.
Of course, Erica. Thank you for having me.